Hi, Fastra. How's it going? How are you doing today, Fastra? I'm doing a rescue. Hold on. Okay. My mic should be good. I see, Fastra. That is very good luck with your rescue. I hope it goes well. Fastra to the rescue. Stick Amethyst, welcome in. You're pretty epic, Fastra. You're able to do stuff like that. Fastra is always there. Oh, my Kirby. It was because I'm in a new area that I saw the cool video games mural. Yes, I saw that, Fastra. I saw that. That was indeed quite exquisite. Uh-oh. Oh, Miss Marth's messing me up. Oh! Get away from me. Rawr bear. Oh, watch this. That did not work. I almost died because of it. Oh, he got me. He got me. Got him! Ooh. Let's go, Curb. Let's go, Curb. Aw, I thought he was gonna counter. Oh, I'm alive. I'm alive. I'm alive. Kirby's there. Kirby's there to catch that spot dodge. Oh, I SD'd. I SD'd. Oh, that's unfortunate for me. Whoa. Oh, I'm just outframed it in him. Ours says don't have audio. Okay. Let me type my response. If there's more space for Smashy Bros I could hop on as well. Aru. That would be fun. That would be fun. Go for it. All right. Oh, hold on. This match already started. I got you after this match. Got me, got me. Ooh! That's how Kirby does it downtown. Ow, ow. Ah. Arg. What do I do? All might! I can't do it like you, Aru. I can't. If you join the Discord and use that voice. Ah. Sick Amethyst. Thanks for the hydrate. That would be very Hoftua, as the kids say. Good games. Random Marth. Aru, you're going down, man. This is gonna be serious carnage. Trade Arena. What is it? Elite only. Friends? Yeah. No, not team. One-on-one. Rules. Random Battlefield Omega. X-Ray. Badge. Cloud. Donkey. Oh. 5, 6. Aru, you're epic for hopping on, though. You're epic for hopping on.
Step into the ring.
No, we're changing this music, no offense. Xenoblade has some good stuff, right? What is one of the Xenoblade good ones? I wish I knew. We got Minecraft. This is kind of a sadly small amount of songs. All right. Do you need the arena ID, Aru? I don't think I showed it. 14 POD. There we go. Not O, 0. Come on and fight. I shall change the music while I wait. What am I feeling? What am I feeling? This is very faster coded. Aru! Oh no! Joker! He's a formidable foe! Ahoy, hoy! Hey, Stacy Joanne! Welcome in, welcome in! I'm just a playing the Smash Brothers. What kind of stage is this? Aru, I'll take it any day of the week. Woo! How's the connection? Okay, I need to stop mashing. It's so hard. Oh! Royal call out. Stacy, do you have a switch? Nice stab attack. Oh, almost got you. Almost got you. Oh, now you got me. You got me. Oh, shoot. Woo! Alright. Up smash takes it. Alright, alright. Oh, I'm scared. Oh, just outranged. Good. Oh, that was an accident. Oh! The back air! Why are we on that stage? Who is Joker and why am I simping for him? Look, you get to see him. You get to see him all big and stuff. That's Joker. I do. You have a Switch? Imagine.
Be gone.
Be gone. Aru back-aired me. Yeah, you saw that? Isn't that cool? Keep it up, Aru. Uh oh, he's selecting. He's selecting. Ooh, Lucina! What do you think of Lucina, Stacey? She's rather pretty.
1, go!
I, for one, am a fan of these stages. Just saying. Put that out there. Oh. Okay. Oh, Aru. Oh no. Alright, Sephiroth. It's up to you. Oh, and the fair does it. Ha! Says Ganondorf. Aru, are you liking these stage picks? Can you both go King K. Rool next? Bastra, of course.
Choose your fighter.
I'm gonna be a good one. This color. Uh-oh. Alright, we can do this matchup. No, I don't know how to play K. Rool. Well, you're about to see an attempt of that. I cannot guarantee how good it's going to be.
1, go!
Woo! Oh, I hit you a little bit. Ooh, big ol' hit there. Nice. Oh! Whoopsie. Understandable. Bastra said, hey! Yeah, it's just me as K-Roll this time around. Come on, do something. Oh. Woohoo! Oh, the armor. The armor did it. Oh, that was interesting. Oh, okay, good one. Okay, good grab. It's over for me. Aru playing clean with Lucy. Nice. Nice. Oh, the armor. Oh! Nice. Oh! Good one. Basha, how did my K-Will do? Did it live up to yours? GG, Mr. Aaron. X-Ray to badge the cloud. Alright, Aru, for this next match, you have to go Robin. Bayonetta! Ooh, okay. I see how it is. Your Bayonetta, a classic. Now both Pichu, please! Oh, you know I can't say no to that, Pastra. Oh, nice. Diana, oh, back instead. Woo. Oh, I got the combo. Bayonetta be gone. Ah. Oh, big one. You outranged me. I was faced. Good one, good one. Oh. Hello, that old guy. Hello. I will be going Pichu now, just for fast track. Ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. Do-do-do-do-do. That old guy. We're going your favorite character. Pichu. Get ready for this Pichu, Aru.
Three, two, one, go!
Ooh, nice. Oh. Oh, good grab. Oh, okay. Ay. Oh, up smash. He do be up smashing though. Oh. Oh. Oh, oh. Nice. The up smash be up smash. Faster, what do you think about this Pichu battle that's taking place in this lava scary place? Nice. Okay. Oh, I didn't get up smash. Oh, my Pichu! My Pichu.
Pichu wins!
What do you think of that, Pastra? Wow, down smash has no end lag. Yay, thank you guys, of course. Oh, stretching time. I got you.
Choose your fighter!
Let me go Ganon a little more. I can hear you now. Hello. Hello, 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 Mr. Aru. Welcome in. For requests, we'll now have to go through channel points rewards. Wait, what does that mean? Pokemon trainer! He does be trained in Pokemon, though. New lore? What is this new lore you speak of?
3, 2, 1.
Interesting, you start as Squirtle. How fortuitous. This little turtle's beating me up, mate. How am I losing to a little turtle? He's like a foot tall. Ah. Ouch. That accent. No! Oh, his Venusaur is too good. It's too much like a Venus flytrap. Woo! Ah. Uh-oh. Uh-oh, this guy's big and scary. Hopefully he won't do anything rambunctious. Oh, sweet heavens. Ah! Oh, and the back air seals the deal, and he roars in triumph. Oh, jeez. Oh, sweet heavens. Come here. Oh, I caught you spot dodging. Almost. Let's just pretend that worked. Dental! Stop. Back here. Oh, he's got me with the nair. Oh, but the unfortunate up B. Or lack thereof. Ugh. This Charizard. A force to be reckoned with, that's for sure. Come here. Bounce. Back here. What is he doing? No, Alex. Yeah, that's a cool idea, Aru. Sad face. I just got out of the shower. Can you tell? Oh, he's switching. How do I make the channel points rewards? Nice. So you mean you use a certain amount of channel points for which character I go? Oh, I see. Okay. I think I understand. I understand it now. Pyro and Mithra. I understand it now. Pyro and Mithra. Ugh. Oh, he's getting me with the big spinning moves. Okay, Aru. Uh-oh, Min Min came out. Nice. Oh, that was rather brutish of me, that dash attack. I do apologize. Ooh. Get down and out, so I... Oh. There we go. There we go. Do that. Oh. Ooh, he got me with the finish. Uh-oh. Pyro's here. Ooh. Oh, that exploded me. Nice. Ooh. Unfortunate. Ow, ooh, ow, ooh. Oh, you got me. What is he cooking? Oh, a Kirby Bucks redeem. Yeah, I got you. I got you. Oh. Boom! Oh! Sweet heavens. Uh-oh. That was mighty dumb of me. Uh-oh. Fair. Oh! The tilt gets me. Alright. How do I do Kirby Bucks?
Power of the Aegis.
The power of the Aegis. Good one, Mr. R. You want to stay Pyro? Nope. He's switching. Alright. It is now there. On my way back to the station, so I won't be able to respond for a while, but I'm still listening. Thank you. Thank you, Pastor. Thank you for listening when no one else would.
3, 2, 1, go!
Oh, the Nair takes it. Come back here. No! Faster. I guess you can't request characters right now. This character sucks. Ba-da-ba-ba-da-da. Roy's our boy. what's gonna happen with Roy.
One, go!
Other than that, mate. Ooh, he's doing it. He's doing it. He's smacking me around. Oh, snap. I got lucky. Ooh, finishes the edge guard solidly. Solidly. Ooh. Oh, that's a big old destruction there. Uh-oh, he's advancing on me. Oh, your Roy is crispy. Oh, he intercepted it. Gotcha at the fair. Good stuff.
Failure's not an option.
Failure's not an option. I'm a Super Mario. Wahoo! A Super Mario say hello. Why am I cut off on a face cam? How do I fix that? Hello! I'm a dude number one. I'm a number one. Wahoo-wee! Jungle level from Melee.
Go!
Alright, the Mario comes out to play. Uh-oh. That worked. Oh, he jumped out of there. He jumped out of that situation. Ooh. Nice. Oh no, mamma mia, mamma mia. Why did you do this? He tried to do it. He tried to do it, ladies and gentlemen. He tried to do it. Nice back airs. I almost got the light hitbox. The up air. Oh. Oh, the up smash. Nice up B. Ooh, nice up smash. Holy smokes. The F tilt. Mamma mia. Super Mario. Chug. Mamma mia, pizzeria. Yes, exactly.
Choose your fighter.
Soldier, first class. Cloud storms onto the scene with my Banjo and Kazooie.
3,
Who is Banjo and Kazooie?
1, go!
I don't understand. I use this grenade and throw it at you. And what do you do when I throw the grenade at you? Eh? Eh? Yeah, you can't do nothing. Uh-oh. Oh, he blocks it. He blocks the Wonder Wing. Oh, he just dodges the other one effortlessly. Nice. Roll up. Roll away. Smash. Smash. Hey. Oh! Good one, Aru. No, he went past my defenses. Good back air. I will win this. Ooh, the Wonder Wing. The Wonder Wing takes it. He did it like that. He just did it like that. Gotta go eat dinner. Be back in a bit. Oh, okay. What are you having? What are you having, Sir Aru? Enjoy your dinner, Aru.
Choose your fighter.
Will anyone join? That is the question. I'll give it one more minute, and if no one joins, I'll just make a new room. Alrighty. Ooh, raw music.
Elite Smash.
I'm gonna try my hand at Fox, a top tier. Let's see how I do with my mashing. Little Mac, Giga Mac Rush. Discord? I'm not adding Discord.
3, 2, 1, go!
Oh shoot. Whoa! Oh wait, that beat that. Ooh. Ooh, again. Good, nice back there. Nice back there. Damn, I'm just getting bodied. Alright. That did it. That did him away. Ooh, I should have just blocked. Back in. Oh, and that's the game. Fox goes down.
Mega Man wins.
Good stuff, Mega Man. You were Mega. Oh, he left. Bye, Mega Man. Oops. I didn't go a good direction there. Mega Man!
3, 2, 1, go!
Ooh! Got to. Scoop me up. Oh, that was sus. That was sus on my part. I don't know what that was. That's a piece. That's it. Hey, Stacy. Sending those sushi emotes. Let's go. Rematch, yes. Oh, he left again. That is quite alright, Mr. Fox. If you want to leave, you can leave.
Solo battle. Jigglypuff.
Playing Jigglypuff. Mimi.
3, 2,
Let's do this, Ike.
go!
No, don't let this be the death of me! It was the death of me. I'm back! Hi, Aru. Watch this. Watch this, Aru. Easy as pie, with pizza in my stomach. Hey, good to hear. Hope you enjoyed the pizza, man. Woo. Stop it! Stop it! Stop! Hey. Oh. Nice back end. Oh, snap. The F smash takes it.
I must move forward.
Why must you move forward, Ike?
Solo battle.
I'm hosting. Gotcha. Password is 69. Nice. How do I do this? Me when the battle bus is coming. Uh-huh. You know it, you know it.
Step into the ring. Ready?
Crawl. Alright, your Roy was pretty good, so I'm expecting highly. It's the same thing about your crawl.
3, 2, 1, go!
That was maybe a cool option. I'll smash to punish. Good stuff, Art. But I can do that.
How about this?
Oh, no, very fortunate.
How about this?
Nice. Oh. The weird interaction at the ledge. Ganondorf wins! Boop, yeah! I can't jare on Joy-Cons. Ah, you're on the Joy-Cons. I see, I see. What's jare?
Choose your fighter.
Who should I play? I'll stick with Ganondorf. Who are you going, Alex? From again! Typically, you want jab back air as a kill confirm. Oh, yeah, jab aerial. I can see why you would need that.
1, go!
Oh, he just did it. All right, 2-2. Uh-oh. Oh no. Alright, one stock apiece. What will you do with that stock? Alright, one hit.
How about this? I'll end you. Wrong. Anything can
GG.
change.
Anything can change.
Ready?
Let's go again, Aru.
3, 2, 1, go!
Nice.
How about this?
Oh, shoot. Dun, dun. There, he got me, he got me. Did it. He got that. He got that spike. Was that supposed to be Jer?
How about this? I'll end you. Out of my way.
Oh, almost had it. He sealed the deal affirmatively.
Wrong.
Good one,
I will
Mr.
cut a
Aru.
path.
I will cut path. Why would you cut path?
Ready?
Alright, here we go.
Three, two, one, go!
Almost had it, maybe. The random F smash. Nice.
Out of my way! Your way!
Nice. Big counter. The up smash.
I'll end you!
Uh-oh. Thought I would have time.
Out of my way!
And he did not have time. Oh, Aru. Ba-da-da-da-da. That's what I get. You definitely had me with that edge guard. Robin! 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 We like Robin. We like Robin. Woohoo, woohoo.
3, 2, 1, go!
Oh, he totally caught me shielding. Oh. Oh, she's a tricky little bugger. She likes to throw stuff. Oh, snap. Yup. Solid edge guard coming out from Aru. Oh. Oh, got me. What happened? Stretching time. I got you, stick amethyst. Yeah. Pretty solid punish there. Oh, nice grab. Dash attack! Dash attack! Ooh. Ooh. Dang. Oh, that's it?
Game! Robin, win!
I've got your back.
Robin could kill me and I'd say thank you. Dang, Aru. That's how it is with Robin? I see, I see.
3, 2, 1, go!
Dash attack. Oh, snap. Oh, go through air dodge. Good. Nice. Nice usage there, Arlo. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. That's a punish and a half right there. Gotta grab, but at what cost? Oh, he just caught me standing on that platform. Like it was free real estate. And got me. Uh-oh. Oh, snap. Uh-oh. Uh-oh, he's gonna keep doing it. True. True, I know. Let's go, Robin. Let's go at it again. Nice. Ooh, big old snap right there. Oh. Fair. Oh, he Got away from it. Ooh, just a big ol' F smash. Alright. Next one will be my last case. I thought I had my jump. I remember that. You just... Alright, last game, Mr. Aru. Who you gonna go? Let me know. Oh, sticking it with Robin. Alright, let's do it. Let's do it. Light steal. Ooh, good one. That does not reach at all. Sucks. Ooh. Hit him. Bit of a shorter stream today, an hour and a half. But thanks for stopping by. Thanks for playing these games. Hopefully we can play again more soon, because that was very fun. Boo! What do you mean, Stacy? Heck yeah, good gaming. Good gaming. It was very fun. Alrighty, y'all. Thanks for coming around. Stacy and Aru, Stick Mom, Bastra, that old guy who is crazy. Did you not see that high ELO gaming? Yes, let's go. High ELO gaming of on twitch.tv. But yeah, thank y'all for watching. And if you ever find yourself trying to play Smash during a football game, especially if it's Quasimodo's football game, then you take care out there. This was a good stream. Thank you, Fastra. Thank you.
Game now, trying to run away wherever possible.
Team Good lo jugaba,
going to be running away from these diamonds.
pero
Whatever is coming his way, he's got to create as much space as humanly possible. No, only 2% differential. Not quite the 8% we saw before, and still 40 seconds on the clock. Plenty of time for either player to get the lead.
This is exactly what we're talking about, right? The equalizer.
Ojalá y no haya timeout, bro.
It doesn't matter that Peanut killed him at 150, killed him at 110, because now it's 0-0, like you said. 2%. It may be in Team's left favor, but that's one hit.
It's one hit, it's one sneeze, it's a tickle, it is anything that comes his way.
It is
We are looking for anything 5%, that's double. That's double.
That's still potentially a single aerial. He does have, that is big.
That's huge.
He is no
he gets
longer
hit, though.
one aerial ahead. Now two's going to have to hit him a couple of times. 5 seconds on the clock, but he has to play this right. He has to stall it out in the air, and he does so. He gets away with it, and Peanut now up 2-0 against Toon. The same fashion both times.
I know we're seeing
Pasa de
intense
idiota.
last hit situations. Can't believe it's come down to these last bits of time, both chasing each other for the
qué verga está pasando, brother, por favor. Lo único que están haciendo es que el stream dure más.